There's a moment in sport that has nothing to do with the score, nothing to do with rankings, records, or prize money. It's the moment when something happening on a court or a track or a field stops being just competition and becomes something that makes a grown man emotional. Something that makes a legend, someone who has literally seen everything the sporting world has to offer, go quiet. That moment happened in Rome, May 2026. And the man who went quiet was Valentino Rossi, 9-time MotoGP world champion, the greatest motorcycle racer who ever lived, the man they call the Doctor. And the person who made him feel that way was a 20-year-old tennis player from Manila named Alex. Let that sit for a second. Valentino Rossi. A man who has raced at 340 kilometers per hour, who has traded paint with Marc Marquez on the last lap at Jerez, who has stood on podiums in front of 90,000 screaming fans at Mugello where the yellow shirts stretch as far as the eye can see, where people travel from every corner of Italy just to be in the same space as him. That man walked into the Foro Italico expecting to watch a tennis match, a nice afternoon in Rome, maybe get recognized a few times, enjoy the clay court season the way any Italian sports fan would. And instead, he saw something that stopped him, completely. Because from the moment he entered the stadium, it wasn't Italian blue he saw. It wasn't the tricolor. What he saw, draped over shoulders and painted on cheeks and waving from every corner of the stands, were the colors red, white, and blue, Philippine flags, hundreds of them, maybe more. And rising above the noise of a packed Roman stadium was a chant that didn't sound like anything this tournament had ever heard before. Laban Alex, Laban Alex. If you don't know what that means, Laban is a Filipino word. It means fight. It means keep going. It means we are with you no matter what. And in that stadium, thousands of kilometers from the Philippines, it echoed off the marble and clay like it was something sacred. Rossi turned to the tournament official who was walking him to his seat and he asked, simply, genuinely, "What is this?" And the official smiled because he had already explained it to Francesco Totti a few days before and to Andrea Bocelli the day before that. Now it was Valentino Rossi's turn. And what followed was one of the most extraordinary afternoons in Italian Open history. Not because of the tennis, though the tennis was brilliant, but because of what it revealed about a young woman from Manila who has turned the sport of tennis into something deeply personal for millions of people who had never thought about tennis before she came along. Now, before we get into what Rossi said, before we get into what happened in that private room near the players' lounge, let me take you back to who this man is and why his reaction matters. Valentino Rossi grew up in Tavullia, a small town in central Italy. He wasn't supposed to be the greatest. When he was coming up, there were faster kids, more naturally talented riders who people assumed would dominate. But Valentino had something those riders didn't. He had a relationship with the fans that was almost supernatural. He understood, even as a teenager, that the crowd wasn't just there to watch. They were there to feel. And if you gave them something to feel, something to believe in, they would carry you. They would lift you over the line when your legs had nothing left. Mugello was his church. The sea of yellow that filled that circuit every time he raced at home is one of the most iconic images in all of motorsport. 90,000 people becoming one organism, one voice, one heartbeat for the man in the yellow helmet. That is the Rossi experience. And when he saw the Philippine fans in Rome doing the exact same thing for Alex, he didn't just appreciate it, he recognized it. He felt it in his chest like muscle memory. Because he had lived that. He had been that young rider who looked into the stands and drew strength from the people who had given everything just to be in the same building as him. So when Rossi sat down in that front row seat and watched Alex play, he wasn't watching a tennis match. He was watching a mirror of his own youth. Alex was in the second round, a grueling match that swung back and forth the way second-round clay court matches always do. But what made it different What made this particular afternoon feel like something more than sport was the way the crowd behaved. These weren't passive spectators sitting quietly and applauding politely at the end of rallies. They were in it. Every point was a collective exhale or a collective roar. When Alex pushed an opponent back with a heavy forehand, the stands erupted. When she struggled, when the match got tight and the pressure mounted, the chant got louder. Not quieter, louder. Laban Alex. And that is the thing that got Rossi. That is the thing that made the greatest motorcycle racer alive lean forward in his chair and just watch. Because he knew from personal experience that what those fans were doing wasn't just cheering. They were giving her something. They were literally transferring energy from themselves to her across that clay court. He had felt that energy from the other direction. He knew what it did to an athlete. And he knew that not every athlete could receive it and channel it the way Alex clearly could. After the match, after Alex had fought her way through to the next round, the press gathered, and someone asked Rossi the obvious question. What did you see in Alex that reminded you of your own career? And the room waited for something predictable. Something about hard work or mental strength or the importance of consistency on clay. But Rossi didn't do predictable. He leaned back, took a breath, looked toward the court where Alex was still out there, still signing autographs for a line of fans that had barely moved in 30 minutes. And then he said something that nobody in that room forgot. When I was young, I was not the most talented on the grid. There were others with more natural speed, but I had something else. I had the fans. And when you know that 90,000 people are not just watching you but are behind you, it changes everything. You cannot give up. Because if you lose, you're not just disappointing yourself, you're disappointing all of them. He looked toward the court again. Alex has that. She carries them, and they carry her. That is not something you can teach. You are born with it. The room went quiet. And then he said the sentence that Filipino fans have been sharing everywhere since that afternoon. She reminds me of myself, at 20. Not because of her tennis, because of her heart. Now pause and think about what he just said. Valentino Rossi, who has battled Jorge Lorenzo wheel-to-wheel in the final laps at Laguna Seca, who went toe-to-toe with Casey Stoner at his peak, who had the infamous race with Marc Marquez at Sepang that the MotoGP world still argues about, looked at a 20-year-old tennis player from Manila and said, "She reminds me of me." He wasn't talking about technique. He wasn't talking about footwork or shot selection or how she handles a tiebreak. He was talking about something that sits underneath all of that. The invisible thing that separates athletes who are very good from athletes who become something larger than sport. The connection. The bond. The relationship between a performer and the people who have given their hearts to that performer. And then Rossi did something that nobody expected. After the press availability, before he left the stadium, he didn't head for the VIP exit. He didn't go to the players' hospitality area or the corporate boxes. He walked toward the general admission stands, the section where the Philippine flags were densest, where the OFWs had packed in together, the overseas Filipino workers who have built lives across Europe and who came to Rome that day, not just to watch tennis, but to be part of something, to feel connected to home through a girl from Manila who had made it all the way to the Foro Italico. Most of these fans didn't recognize him at first. Valentino Rossi, without the helmet, without the racing leathers, looks like any other Italian guy in a dark jacket. He's not a huge man. He doesn't dominate a room physically. But when one person recognized him, when one voice called out Vale, the ripple spread instantly, and suddenly, the section that had spent the entire afternoon chanting for Alex was now staring at one of the most famous athletes Italy has ever produced. And here's what Rossi did. He didn't wave from a distance. He didn't do a quick photo and leave. He pointed at their Philippine flags. He pointed to his own chest, right over his heart. And he said it loud enough for the cameras around him to pick it up. Tifosi incredibili, incredible fans. and the section absolutely lost its mind. The chant shifted in seconds. Veil, veil, veil. And Rossi stood there and let it happen. He smiled the way you smile when something has genuinely moved you. Not the performance smile, not the media smile, but the real one. Later, when someone asked him about that moment, he was humble about it in that characteristically Italian way he has. He said, "They traveled so far. They gave so much. They deserve to be seen. I was just the one who happened to be there. Just the one who happened to be there." Said the 9-time world champion standing in the general admission section of the Foro Italico surrounded by Philippine flags. The day wasn't over yet, because before Rossi left the stadium, he asked if he could meet Alex. Not a photo opportunity, not a handshake for the cameras. He asked to actually sit with her, to talk. And the meeting they had, in a private area near the players' lounge, lasted nearly 10 minutes. Alex walked in still glowing from the win, still in that elevated state athletes get into after a battle where they had to reach deep to get through. She knew who was waiting for her. She had grown up watching this man race. She knew the Mugello battles. She knew the Lorenzo rivalry. She knew the weight of what it meant to have Valentino. Rossi stand up as she entered the room, which is what he did. He stood, as a gesture of respect, and the meeting began. They didn't talk about tennis. They didn't talk about racing. They talked about the crowd. Rossi sat across from her and spoke, directly, the way someone who has learned a hard lesson talks to someone who is still learning it. "The crowd you have," he said, "do not take it for granted. I have seen many young athletes with great talent, great potential, but over time they lose the connection with the fans. They become distant, they close off. And when that happens, something essential is gone. You cannot let that happen." Alex listened. She didn't rush to respond. She just absorbed it. And Rossi kept going. "Your people are your power. When you are exhausted, when you feel like your body has nothing left and your mind is telling you to slow down, remember them. They are not just watching you. They are living through you. Every point you win, they win. Every time you refuse to give up, they feel it. That is a gift. It is rare. Protect it." And then, at the door, just before he left, Rossi paused. He said, "In racing, we have a saying, the race is long, and in the end, it is only with yourself." He let that land for a second. Then he said, "But today, I learned something new. The race is long, but you are never alone." And he left. Valentino Rossi has won 115 Grand Prix races across his career. He has stood on podiums on 5 continents. He has been celebrated in ways that most human beings cannot even imagine. But when he walked out of the Foro Italico, that afternoon in Rome, the thing he was carrying wasn't a trophy or a race result. It was a feeling. The feeling of watching someone else have the thing he once had. The connection. The crowd. The unspoken agreement between an athlete and the people who believe in them so completely that they will travel 11,000 kilometers just to stand in the same air and chant their name. Alex is 20 years old. She is still in the early chapters of what could be a very long story. She hasn't won a Grand Slam. She hasn't peaked yet. There are years of matches ahead of her. Years of hard clay court sessions and early morning flights and tough losses in places far from home. But something happened in Rome that goes beyond what the rankings say or what the results sheet shows. Because one of the greatest athletes the world has ever produced sat in the front row and watched her play and said, "She has the heart of a champion." When you have that, the trophies will come. And the Philippine flags were still everywhere when he said it. Draped over shoulders and waving in the warm Roman afternoon, red and white and blue against the clay and the marble and the old Roman sky. The doctor had seen everything, every possible permutation of greatness and competition and pressure and glory. And on an ordinary Tuesday in May at an Italian tennis tournament, a girl from Manila made him feel something new. He came to Rome to watch tennis. He left thinking about himself at 20. And what he said at the end of it all was simple and clean and completely true. She will go far. Very far. I have no doubt. Neither do we. If this story hit you the way it hit us, drop a comment below and let us know what you think Valentino Rossi seeing that moment meant for Alex and for Filipino tennis as a whole. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time, because this channel exists for exactly these kinds of stories, the ones that go beyond the scoreline and remind you why sport matters in the first place.